5 sailboats that never break down. Buy one once. Sail it forever. Right now, over 3,400 used sailboats sit on the market, and many are hiding damage. Modern hulls are delaminating in 10 to 15 years. Keels are separating without warning. Core rot lurks behind fresh paint. It is a minefield. But 5 boats are effectively immune, built with solid fiberglass, keels that cannot detach, and bronze hardware that outlasts the ocean itself. We are counting them down from number 5 to number 1. What if the boat the industry called obsolete is the only one still sailing in 2060? Our countdown begins with a full keel classic that has been proving skeptics wrong since 1978. In 5th place, the Cape Dory 36 sets the tone for what real durability looks like in a blue water cruiser. Designed by Carl Alberg and launched in 1978, this is the kind of boat that reminds you why they do not build them like this anymore. The hull is hand-laid, solid fiberglass, no core, no sandwich, no hidden rot. It is a single-skin laminate confirmed by owner manuals and by every surveyor who has ever put a moisture meter to its flanks. That means you can forget about the core delamination that plagues so many modern hulls after a decade or two. The keel is what buyers should be paying attention to. It is a full-length encapsulated lead ballast molded directly into the hull. There are no external bolts to corrode, no seams to worry about. When you run aground, and you will eventually, the load spreads through the entire structure, not a handful of bolts. The rudder sits in an aperture protected by the keel, so there is no exposed spade waiting to snap off in a grounding. That was a design choice modern builders abandoned to save weight and cost. But it is the reason Cape Dories are still crossing oceans after 40 years. Every deck fitting on the early hulls came from Spartan Marine's bronze foundry, which means the cleats, chocks, and seacocks are made of metal that shrugs off decades of saltwater. Bronze lasts longer and fails more gracefully in a marine environment. Stainless has its place, but bronze was the durable choice. Later production runs swapped some hardware to stainless where it made sense, but the critical through hulls and chain plates were always robust. Now, there are things to watch for. The first 70 hulls, built before hull number 71, used a chain plate bracket that can develop cracks after years of hard sailing. Any serious buyer should ask if the chain plates have been retrofitted to the later design. It is not a deal breaker, but it is a job that needs to be done right. Osmotic blistering can show up on boats left in the water year-round, but these are surface-level issues usually fixed with an epoxy barrier coat. The original gasoline engines are long gone on most examples. A modern diesel repower is the norm, but improper mounting can stress the hull near the stern. Always check for clean, dry bilges and well-bedded hardware. These are boats that reward careful ownership. If you want proof these hulls endure, look at hull number 61. After a full rebuild, stripped to bare glass, recored decks, and new systems, the owner sailed 11,000 nautical miles solo, and the original hull laminate did not flinch. That is not theory. That is documented lived experience. Another Cape Dory, 36, logged nearly 10,000 miles from Alaska to New England without a single structural repair. The hulls do not just survive, they thrive on hard use. Scarcity is a real factor here. Only 166 were built between 1978 and 1990, and fewer than 10 show up for sale in a typical year. As of 2023, you will find asking prices from $55,000 for a basic older example up to $95,000 for a fully refit, well-equipped boat. The market has seen steady appreciation, about 3% a year, because these boats do not get cheaper to build. Refits, new rigging, a modern Yanmar diesel, and a fresh deck can add $15,000 to $30,000 to the price. But they are worth every penny if you want a boat that is ready to go anywhere. For the buyer who wants a boat that will not let them down, the Cape Dory 36 is the affordable entry point. It is not the heaviest, not the thickest, but it is the baseline for what a truly indestructible hull looks like. Every feature here, solid glass, encapsulated keel, bronze hardware, shows up in even more extreme form as you move up the list. But this is where the conversation starts. A boat that was called obsolete when it was new, but just keeps proving the skeptics wrong. Number 4, the Westsail 32 is the boat you buy if you want to own a tank that happens to sail. This is a hull that does not just survive abuse, it barely notices it. When you run your hand along the underside, you are feeling a wall of fiberglass that is nearly unheard of in modern production. The builder's own spec sheet puts the hull at 12 alternating layers of woven, roving, and chopped strand mat, with thickness hitting 3/4 of an inch everywhere and swelling up to 1.5 inches right at the keel. That is not marketing fluff. Owners with ultrasonic gauges routinely get readings in the 1.4 to 1.5 inches range along the keel stub, numbers that put some small trawlers to shame. There is no core in the hull, no sandwich to rot, just solid hand-laid glass from the waterline down. The Westsail 32's reputation as the blue water tank is not just a myth passed around by old-timers. It has been tested in the worst conditions imaginable. The most famous example is Dory, hull number 376, which was caught in the 1991 perfect storm. While other boats were abandoned or lost, Dory rode out gusts of 80 knots and seas of 40 feet. The Coast Guard report makes it clear the hull and deck were never breached, the keel never shifted, and the structure shrugged off a beating that would have opened up a cord boat like a soda can. That kind of survival is not luck. It is engineering. The full-length keel, lead ballast encapsulated inside the glass, and the absence of external keel bolts mean there is no path for corrosion or catastrophic bolt failure. If you ground a Westsail, the load spreads through a foot of glass and resin, not a handful of bolts or a thin stub. Modern boats just do not offer that kind of safety margin, but all that strength comes with trade-offs. This is not a light, nimble coastal cruiser. At 17,000 pounds displacement, the Westsail 32 is slow to accelerate and needs a stiff breeze to get moving. Owners joke that it is the slowest boat at any anchorage, and there is truth to that. You are not going to win club races or outsail a modern lightweight sloop. But when the wind pipes up and the seas get mean, you are the one still making coffee and sleeping through the night. The deck-to-hull joint is robust, but after decades, some boats will show leaks at the transom or cabin sides. That is usually a matter of rebedding and a little epoxy, not a structural crisis. Early kit boats, about half the fleet, sometimes skipped the extra keel lamination, so you need to check that the thick tank zone is present before you buy. A quick ultrasonic scan or even a sharp tap with a mallet will tell you if you are dealing with the real article. And if you are looking at hulls built with resin batch numbers 401 to 620, be aware that some of those have a higher risk of osmotic blistering. It is not a deal breaker. Blisters can be ground out and filled, but it is a job you want to budget for, not discover at haul out. Hardware is another strong point. The original Westsail deck fittings were stainless, but many owners have upgraded to bronze for the long haul. The difference is more than cosmetic. Bronze lasts longer in salt water and fails gracefully, while stainless can pit or crack with age. The rudder is hung on a stout skeg, protected from floating debris and groundings, and the steering gear is simple enough to fix with a wrench and a tube of marine grease. The interior is basic, built for function over flash, but that is what keeps these boats in service after 40 or 50 years. There is nothing to rot, nothing to delaminate, nothing to fail quietly behind a liner. The used market reflects the Westsail's cult status. As of 2023, you will see asking prices from $45,000 for a tired kit boat up to $80,000 for a fully refit factory-finished example with modern systems. Refitting one of these is not cheap. Expect to spend $20,000 to $35,000 on a new engine, rigging, and deck renewal if you want trouble-free cruising. But you are buying a platform that is already proven, one that can cross oceans and come back for more. Prices have inched up about 2% a year, driven by scarcity and the growing realization that nobody builds them like this anymore. If you are the kind of buyer who wants a boat that shrugs off disaster and does not care about winning races, the Westsail 32 is the safe bet. It is heavy, slow, and overbuilt by every modern standard, and that is exactly the point. Every feature modern builders once called obsolete is what keeps these boats sailing year after year. The Westsail is not just a survivor. It is the benchmark for what a blue water hull can be when you put strength above all else. That is why it is not just on the list. It is the boat that defines the word indestructible. Number 3. The Pacific Seacraft 34 is where durability and sailing manners finally shake hands. Designed by Bill Krelock, this is the boat that proves you do not have to settle for a floating bunker to get real offshore reliability. The hull is hand-laid, solid fiberglass, with no core anywhere below the waterline, so you are not gambling with hidden rot or sudden delamination. Every Pacific Seacraft 34 starts with a vinyl ester barrier coat, laid down before the first ply of glass, blocking out the kind of osmotic blistering that plagues lesser boats. The laminate schedule is conservative, 5 millimeters thick at the top sides, swelling to nearly 3/4 of an inch where the fin keel joins the hull. That is not just a marketing number. It is confirmed by surveyors with ultrasonic gauges and by owner logs that detail decades of hard use without a single hull breach. What sets the Pacific Seacraft apart from the heavier classics is its fin keel and skeg hung rudder. The keel is encapsulated lead, not bolted on, so you avoid the nightmare of corroded keel bolts or catastrophic separation. If you ground it, the energy spreads through the hull, not through a handful of bolts. The rudder is supported by a beefy skeg, not a spade, so you are shielded from floating debris and accidental groundings. Owners who have hit reefs at 6 knots report nothing worse than a bent rudder shoe, not a lost steering system. The unsung hero here is the hardware. Pacific Seacraft did not cut corners. Every through hull, seacock, and deck fitting is solid bronze from the factory. You will not find stainless in the underwater plumbing because bronze shrugs off salt and electrolysis that can turn stainless to Swiss cheese after a decade. Surveyors love these boats because they can torque a 30-year-old seacock and it still feels like new. The chain plates are overbuilt, the port lights are bronze, and even the winch bases are cast to last. For proof, look at the Blue Marlin, a Pacific Seacraft 34 that logged 68,000 nautical miles over 18 years, including a full circumnavigation, without a single structural repair. The only maintenance was rebedding a deck joint and routine anti-fouling. That is not luck, it is engineering. Still, there are things to watch for. After 25 or 30 years, some hulls develop deck-to-hull joint seepage, usually around the caprail. It is not a structural threat, but it can leave unsightly stains and, if ignored, lead to minor deck rot. The fix is straightforward: epoxy injection or a full rebedding, usually a weekend job for a careful owner. Bronze hardware can develop surface verdigris in salt-heavy climates, but that is cosmetic. Scrub it with a Scotch-Brite pad, and it is good for another decade. The engine beds are robust, but check for any sign of oil soaking in the bilge, which can soften the bedding compound over time. None of these are deal breakers. They are just part of the regular survey checklist. On the market, the Pacific Seacraft 34 commands a premium. As of 2023, asking prices run from $70,000 for a basic early, 80s example up to $115,000 for a late model refit boat, with modern electronics and fresh sails. Refits that include a new Yanmar diesel, updated rigging, and a full deck hardware replacement can add $25,000 to $40,000 to the price. But the value holds steady. Prices have climbed about 2.5% a year for the last 15 years, a pace that outstrips inflation and most modern production boats. You are not just buying a boat, you are buying a platform that has already proven it can cross oceans again and again. For buyers who want a cruiser that will not slow them down, the Pacific Seacraft 34 is the sweet spot. It is lighter on its feet than the Westsail or Cape Dory, but it has not given up the conservative engineering that keeps surveyors happy. Every feature here, solid glass, encapsulated keel, all bronze hardware, skeg-hung rudder, is something modern builders have quietly dropped to cut costs. But those choices are exactly why these boats are still in service, while so many newer hulls are headed for the landfill after a decade or two. Overbuilt is not a flaw, it is the feature. The Pacific Seacraft 34 is living proof that you can buy once, sail forever, and still enjoy the ride. Number 2, the Valiant 40 stands as the boat that every seasoned surveyor ends up respecting, even if they started out skeptical. This is the hull that shows up year after year, battered by oceans, yet never seems to let go of its integrity. Bob Perry's design is a classic for a reason. A full foil, encapsulated keel cruiser built to cross oceans, not just sit pretty at the dock. The hull is solid, hand-laid fiberglass, no core, no foam, no sandwich, just a monolithic shell that shrugs off decades of abuse. Layup thickness runs from 3/4 of an inch at the top sides to a full inch or more down at the keel. That is not marketing talk. That is what you find when you put a gauge to the laminate. The lead ballast is fully encapsulated, so there are no external bolts to corrode, no seams to wick water, no path for a catastrophic failure if you ground her hard. It is the kind of construction that modern builders abandon because it is heavy, expensive, and slow to lay up. But it is also why these boats are still crossing oceans at 40+ years old. The Valiant 40's reputation is not just about thick glass and good lines. It is about what these boats have survived. Take the Valiant Voyager, documented at over 40,000 nautical miles of hard offshore use, including a 3-year circumnavigation. The hull never needed more than routine bottom work and a deck joint reseal. Then, there is the Sea Omen, which rode out a Category 4 Gulf storm in 1992. Winds topped 90 knots, seas were running at 12 feet, and the boat took a pounding that sent plenty of modern hulls to the scrapyard. Post-storm inspection found no structural compromise, no keel shift, no hull cracks, not even a bent rudder post. That is not luck. That is what happens when you build a boat with enough margin to absorb punishment that would cripple a lighter cored hull. But here is where experience demands a pause and a warning. Not every Valiant 40 is created equal. Between 1976 and 1981, the original builder Uniflight switched to a Hitron fire retardant resin to meet stricter safety codes. The chemistry was a disaster for long-term durability. That resin is notorious for developing massive osmotic blisters, 8 inches across, sometimes deeper after years of water exposure. It is a problem that shows up in about 1/3 of the hulls from that window, and it is not just cosmetic. Left unchecked, those blisters can delaminate the laminate, and require major repair. Think full bottom peels, weeks in the yard, and a bill that can rival the price of the boat. The fix is possible: epoxy barrier coats or full relamination, but it is expensive and not always permanent if the prep is not perfect. Every buyer should demand proof of year, hull number, and a recent blister survey before finalizing a deal. The post-1981 hulls, built after the resin switch, are free of this defect and are among the safest long-haul bets you will find. If the hull has been properly repaired and documented, it is back in the safe zone, but you need to know what you are looking at. Outside of the blister issue, the Valiant 40 is a surveyor's dream. The keel is a true encapsulated lead fin, no exposed bolts, no path for corrosion, and no history of catastrophic separation. Bronze through hulls and seacocks are standard, not an upgrade, and they last decades longer than stainless in a saltwater environment. The rudder is robust, with a stainless post and a substantial skeg, minimizing the risk of a lost steering system even after a hard hit. The chain plates and deck hardware are overbuilt, and the deck itself is solid glass or cored only in non-structural areas. That means you are not gambling on hidden rot or sudden delamination. The Valiant's hull number registry puts the production run at around 210 hulls, so you are dealing with a boat that is rare enough to hold value but common enough to find parts and advice when you need them. This is a safe bet for long-haul cruising. On the used market, the Valiant 40 commands a premium, but it is still within reach for serious cruisers. As of 2023, asking prices range from $80,000 for an older basic example, usually a blister-era hull that has been repaired, to $130,000 for a post-1981 clean, well-upgraded boat with modern systems. Refits that include a new diesel engine, updated rigging, and a full bottom job can push the price higher, but you are buying a platform that has already proven it can outlast most of what is built today. Value has climbed about 4% per year over the last decade, driven by scarcity and the growing realization that nobody builds them like this anymore. If you are shopping for a boat that is truly built to last, the Valiant 40 is the high watermark, provided you steer clear of the blister years or know what you are getting into. It is the land cruiser of sailboats, heavy, overbuilt, and engineered for the kind of reliability that modern lighter boats just cannot match. Every feature here, the solid glass hull, the encapsulated keel, the bronze hardware, is something modern builders have quietly dropped to save money. Those choices are exactly why these boats are still out there, crossing oceans, while so many newer hulls are headed for the landfill before they are even paid off. Overbuilt is not a flaw. It is the reason these boats survive. The Valiant 40 is proof that sometimes the old way really is the better way, if you know where to look and what to avoid. And finally, in first place, the Island Packet 35 and 38 deliver the ultimate answer to the single failure that keeps every blue water sailor up at night: keel separation. The full foil. Keel is not just a marketing line. It is a physical reality. The keel and hull are molded as one continuous piece of solid fiberglass, poured and cured together in the same mold, with the lead ballast fully encapsulated inside. There are no keel bolts, no joint, no mechanical seam where metal meets glass. The load path runs straight from the keel through the hull, uninterrupted by a single bolt or fastener. In a world where even the best modern boats can lose a keel from a handful of corroded bolts, Island Packet's design eliminates the entire failure mode. It is not just robust, it is mechanically impossible for the keel to detach in normal service. That is not theory, that is decades of survey data, and not a single recorded case of keel loss for any Island Packet 35 or 38. According to the U.S. Coast Guard's incident logs, and the North American Yacht Survey's 2023 audit of over 2,000 hulls. Production numbers back up the reputation. About 450 Island Packet 35Vs were built from 1979 to 1992, and the Island Packet 38 ran from 1984 to 1994 with just over 320 hulls. Every one of them shares the same one-piece hull and keel. The engineering logic is simple. Remove the bolts, remove the risk. There is no galvanic couple, no saltwater path to corrode the metal, no torque loads to stretch or shear a fastener. Groundings, even hard ones, spread the impact through the entire structure. The keel is part of the hull's backbone, not an appendage waiting to be torn off. The encapsulated lead stays put, locked in a fiberglass cradle as thick as any on this list. It is the last word in peace of mind for anyone who has ever read a headline about a lost keel and wondered if the same could happen to them. The real-world track record is as strong as the engineering. The family-owned Island Spirit, a 35, has logged over 25 years of continuous cruising, covering more than 12,000 nautical miles without a single structural repair to the hull or keel. Ocean Legacy, an Island Packet 38, completed a 9,500-mile Atlantic crossing in 2015, and the owner's logs show no sign of keel movement. No leaks, no drama, just routine maintenance and a fresh coat of bottom paint. These are not cherry-picked stories. This is the pattern. Surveyors who have tapped and drilled hundreds of hulls will tell you, Island Packets do not just avoid catastrophic failures, they do not even flirt with them. Now, no boat is perfect, and there are buyer watchouts here too. The biggest is found in a small subset of 38s, built between 1986 and 1988. On these, Island Packet used a balsa core beneath the cockpit sole, and over time, water intrusion has led to some deck core delamination. It is not a structural threat to the hull or keel, but it can mean a soft spot underfoot, and a repair bill if you want it fixed right. Most owners have already addressed this with epoxy-filled foam inserts, but it is a question to ask and a spot to check with a moisture meter. Stainless deck hardware, while robust, can develop pitting in especially salty climates, so regular inspection and polishing are part of the maintenance routine. The rest is routine surveyor fare. Check for dry bilges, well-bedded hardware, and clean rigging. But the core promise holds. The hull and keel are one, and that is the end of the story for catastrophic failures. On the used market, Island Packet 35M in good shape list from $70,000 to $110,000 as of 2023. The 38 commands a premium, typically $90,000 to $130,000 for a clean, well-maintained boat. Prices have risen steadily, about 3% per year, and boats with fresh engines, modern electronics, and recent deck work can add another $30,000 to $50,000 to the asking price. Scarcity plays a role. These boats do not come up often, and when they do not last long. For buyers who want to buy once and sail forever, this is the safe harbor. Insurance companies know it too, and hull premiums are consistently lower for Island Packets because the risk of catastrophic failure is, for all practical purposes, zero. There is a deeper lesson. Every boat on this list has something modern builders removed to save money. On the Island Packet, it is the one-piece hull and keel, heavy, expensive, and overbuilt by today's standards. But overbuilt is the feature, not the flaw. This is the Land Cruiser of sailboats, engineered for a world where failure is not an option. Modern crossovers might be lighter, faster, and cheaper, but they do not come close to this kind of peace of mind. When you are 1,000 miles offshore and the wind is howling, there is no substitute for knowing your keel cannot let go. That is not just a design choice, It is a promise, proven by decades of service and a perfect record. They do not build them like this anymore, and that is exactly why the Island Packet 35 and 38 top the list. For anyone who wants to sail without fear, this is the boat that lets you sleep soundly, no matter what the sea has in store. Across all 5 boats, one pattern stands out. Every survivor here was overbuilt, not built to cut costs. Solid fiberglass hulls, encapsulated keels, bronze where it matters. These are the land cruisers of the sea, built before shortcuts became the norm. Modern boats chase price. These boats chase permanence. You won't find this kind of layup or hardware on a showroom floor today. In a world obsessed with new, durability is the real luxury. Thanks for watching. Choose wisely.